It's a koi story today, and I'm at the ponds of the Cinnamon Lagoon enjoying the company of these beautiful and colorful fish. Koi were originally bred from the carp by farmers because of their bright patches of color. But they became world famous when in 1914, koi were gifted to the Japanese emperor. Koi are omnivores, so they'll eat anything, and they're able to get sunburned. There are 24 varieties, and the oldest koi, named Hanako, lived to be 226 years old. And the biggest koi in the world was around 4 feet long. Isn't it truly a wonderful world? Welcome to Kaleidoscope with me, Savithri Rodrigo, and we are positive, daring, and different. On the show today, we are talking to a world's best-selling novelist, the future of EdTech, and stopping by at Kalapola. A massive thank you to our sponsors on the show, CDB, Srilanka Life, and The Daily Morning. You are truly awesome partners. And if you like what we've got for you, don't forget to subscribe and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
CDB Hybrid Leasing. Enjoy exclusive interest rate and much more for hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and EV vehicles.
So let's have a look at the week that was on CDB Snapshot. Sri Lanka's bank assets grow by 5.1% to 20.4 trillion rupees in 2023, thanks to increased investment in securities. Sri Lanka wins the UN World Restoration Flagship Award for efforts in restoring mangrove ecosystems. The World Meteorological Organization reports that this January was the hottest month on record ever. Greece becomes the first Christian Orthodox majority country to legalize same-sex marriage. An alligator in Nebraska has had emergency surgery for swallowing over 70 metal coins.
You focus on your goals. We will take care of the risks. Srilanka Life.
Welcome to Srilanka Life News Capsule. The days of chalk and board are long gone. We now have multimodal education technology. Educational technology, or EdTech, is something we are utilizing more and more. Recently, 4 Sri Lankan researchers presented a paper on the EdTech landscape in Asia, the Middle East and North Africa at the Southern Voice Conference. And I thought there's no better way to catch up on Sri Lanka's EdTech than from the mouths of the experts. With me today is one of those researchers, Dr. Nisha Arunatilaka, who's the Director of Research at the Institute of Policy Studies. And she joined me in the studio. Tell me a little bit about your study. Why did you focus on these regions?
So the study is about looking at how education technology can improve access to quality education. Now, in Sri Lanka and also in Asia, where the study focus was on, there is access. Children are going to school, but they are really not learning. Now, even in Sri Lanka, about 25% of the children who do O-levels fail it. So this is about, during the COVID-19, a lot of technology was brought in to provide access to education. So this is about learning about these different initiatives and trying to learn from each.
What is Sri Lanka's situation like in EdTech? What are we doing right?
So there are really very good programs. So we identified 2 that is showcased in the study. One is the NANASA that actually fortunately started way before COVID-19. So that was useful during COVID-19, and it started as a TV program. But then subsequently it was extended. Now it is available on the mobile phone and on the computer. It is about providing education resources to students and teachers. And it has kind of evolved over time.
So when looking at Sri Lanka comparatively, what major changes do you think are needed?
We are not using EdTech strategically. What we learned from looking at Asia is there are programs, for example, in India, there is something called O-Labs, which is providing virtual laboratory experiences for children in rural areas who don't have access to labs. Then there are other programs which is targeted at children with disabilities. So we can use examples like this to improve access to quality education where there are gaps in Sri Lanka.
So while looking at it strategically, what do you think would be the challenges that Sri Lanka would face?
One thing is access to information communication technology, but there are ways to overcome that. Also, the teachers are not prepared, they need to be also a little bit tech savvy. But there are solutions if you look around for those things as well. It's just, I think the policymakers should look at it strategically and use education technology to provide quality education to the children.
And now for a quick look at the markets today.
Positive news from the Colombo Stock Exchange. The all-share price index moved up by more than 1% this week on the back of a 3% gain this month, although daily turnover levels remained below the 1 billion rupee mark. The past week saw oil prices rise slightly to around $82 per barrel on concerns over Yemen-based Houthi rebel attacks on ships in the Red Sea. Gold prices moved back up again to just over $2,000 per ounce as the US dollar moved down in anticipation of a drop in US interest rates.
Abu Dhabi keeps adding to the region's stunning building collection with its first ever Hindu temple, the largest in the UAE, being inaugurated this month. Fashion designer Sinead O'Dwyer put on a show during London Fashion Week demonstrating the beauty in diverse experiences and perspectives. A great reminder to love yourself as you are. So we're seated here at the longest installation or at the Galle Literary Festival, The Cube by South Beach Valley-Gummer, and we're upping the ante with our latest guest at GLF, Sir Alexander McCallsmith. Formerly Professor of Medical Law at the University of Edinburgh, he served as an expert on medical law on several British and international committees. He is, however, best known for his works of fiction. He has sold over 40 million copies of his books, which have been translated into 46 languages. He created the #1 Ladies Detective Agency series, the Dalhousie Mysteries series, and the 44 Scotland Street series, which is also the longest running serial novel in the world. He also wrote a serialized online novel, Corduroy Mansions, and has a remarkable resume of brilliant fiction to his name. He's the co-founder of the Really Terrible Orchestra. And he's with me on Kaleidoscope Let's Talk today. Welcome to Sri Lanka. How has our little island been treating you?
Well, very well, as always. I'm always very happy to be in Sri Lanka, which I think is the most beautiful country, and people are very nice.
And so your new book came out on Valentine's Day. It's about a marriage bureau, right?
I'm very interested in the subject of friendship and relationships. That occurs obviously in all my books. People are involved with other people, and the idea of matchmaking is an intriguing one. People in some societies, you have official matchmakers who make it their business to bring people together. In other societies, it may be friends who do that incidentally, but it's a really important part of human life, I think, is the bringing people together and hoping that people who are looking for somebody may be persuaded that this is the person for them, or they may help them to find the right person.
But that's not the essence of your story. Yours is very, very funny. There's a bit of 40 Towers in it, I think.
Well, I think that things can go wrong with matchmaking. I have in this particular series of books, this is the first book in a series, introduced the reader to a company which helps people to meet other people, called the Perfect Passion Company. Now, with a title like that, I think one would have to be quite careful.
All these detective stories that you have written all your life almost, what is the heart of a detective story?
My detective stories aren't about crime, really. They're rather unusual. They're about people, in particular one private detective, Mara Matsui in Botswana, people who help people with problems in their lives. And I think that's rather interesting, that there are people in society who will help others to sort out their personal difficulties, and Maramatswe is one such. So I don't really deal with crime as such, but I deal with problems.
Does your medical law field sort of enter into your detective stories?
A bit. Not to a very great extent, but inevitably what one's been doing in one's professional life can have an effect on what one does as a writer.
So what made you get into fiction writing after being a professor of medical law?
Well, I've always wanted to write, and I wrote as a child and then as a young man, and so I just continued with that, and I take great delight in telling a story, really. I mean, that's what being a novelist is. It's telling a story to people.
You are the co-founder of the Really Terrible Orchestra, which actually came from the fact that you say you play a really terrible bassoon. How did the whole thing come about?
Well, my wife and I decided to form an orchestra for people who'd like to be in an orchestra but who aren't good enough. And there are lots of people in that category. So we set up this orchestra which would have a name that wouldn't put people off. Because if you're going to join something called the Really Terrible Orchestra, you're not going to be too worried about not being very good. And we discovered there were a lot of people who wanted to play in an orchestra, but they were very weak musicians. And that's what we've done, and it's been a great success. It doesn't sound very good, but that's not the point.
The #1 ladies detective agency. You're a man writing about women. Where do you get the insight from?
Well, I think by observing people. I think as a novelist, you look at other people, you listen to what they say, you hear about them, and you have to have that curiosity in order to write a novel. So I just get that from my observation of life, listening to people, hearing what their issues are, discussing things with them, and that gives you plenty of material.
But what are the must-haves when you are actually writing?
I tend to have a cup of red bush tea, rooibos tea, which I like very much indeed. So tea is more my thing. I think here, as a special treat, I might allow myself something like a Diet Coke, which is just a temporary measure. My real choice would be tea. I'm a great fan of tea, and indeed I've visited tea estates in Sri Lanka on past visits, which was absolutely fascinating.
So besides the Marriage Bureau book coming out in February, what else are we to expect from you?
I've finished another novel, which will be published in June, which is a self-standing novel, and I'm currently working on volume 25 of the #1 Ladies Detective Agency. So that's the next book in the Botswana series, and then there'll be a Scotland Street book, and so on. My work, I'm afraid, is never done.
Do enjoy Sri Lanka, and we're hoping to see you again very soon.
Thank you very much indeed.
It was a veritable treasure trove for the senses, and if you like art in any form, Kalapola would have been the heaven you stepped into. The George Keats Foundation launched Kalapola 31 years ago, and the John Keats Group has continued to be a trust to being an inclusive art fair for artists from all over the country. Now, on our walkabouts at Kalapola, we met up with the chairperson of the George Keats Foundation, Malaka Talvatta.
What's special this time is that we've had an unprecedented amount of entries. Kalapola closed in 3 days with over 340 entries of artists, and we are expecting bumper crowds. I think about 50,000 people will walk through this road today, so it's very special, Savithri.
Kalapola gains its inspiration from the world-famous outdoor art fairs in Montmartre, in Paris, and Oxford's Turl Street Art Festival. And this year, Kalapola played host to a record number of nearly 340 artists.
Anybody who is an artist can take part in Kalapola, and also it's a place where anybody can come and buy. You know, it's free for all. You know, entrance is free. Coming and buying art, all the money goes to the artist. So it was a way in which George Keats Foundation thought artists can develop and evolve and show their work to a large number of people in one day.
The George Keats Foundation, which has been at the forefront of catalyzing opportunities for art, pushes boundaries at Kalapola with this uncurated fair for local artists, showcasing not just canvases of opportunity, but also networking and learning opportunities. The foundation continues to open realms for local artists.
Soon after this, we are having something called Sri Lankan Artists, which is a more curated exhibition where senior artists over 35 are exhibiting, and this time again we got so much of interest and so many applications. It's going to be a great show, so keep March free. It will be at the JDA Gallery and you'll be hearing about it.
Here's hoping for a restful February as we look towards March, and we will see you next week.